that Western liberal democracies are moving too slow and science in the 21st century today is moving too fast, or vice versa? Or how can we move in tandem and in parallel?
All right, Dave, the speed of science and the slowness of democracy.
Yeah, thank you. It's a really interesting question. I think within each of these categories, there's a whole range of speeds. So let me just talk about sort of scientific research. In many ways, I agree with you. There's a kind of just overwhelming flood of new preprints, and many get peer-reviewed and published, and then they'll be dealt with the community. It's a minute-by-minute affair. It's not that you can sit around and wait for a month and then go catch up. Right? It's overwhelming. I literally used to have nightmares about what's going to be waiting for me the next morning that I'm going to try to just kind of triage. Right? That pace is exciting, but sometimes also overwhelming. On the other hand, many of the institutions in which we conduct our scientific research are extremely slow to change. Maybe that's in some ways a source of strength. I wouldn't want every university to be changing on the dime. I think sometimes slowness can be very frustrating to those of us who live in them, right, who work in them. But also, I think every now and then, thank goodness this is a ship that's slow to turn. It's not perfect. I wish I had a magic wand for a lot of things. But there's a kind of resiliency built in, at least to some of these kinds of institutions, because they actually do change achingly slowly. And sometimes maybe that's okay. So even just within the science side, let alone the kind of democracy, and I guess they're really not so separated after all, I see a range of different timescales. And now the question is, can we think about good strategies to intervene, to make changes here, knowing that we might not change that over there, right? Can we think about trying to do more than one thing that's going to take different kinds of timescales to enact the changes we're hoping for? That's very abstract. We could go into a case by case, but that's where I'm often struck by the kind of half-century timescale for universities to kind of budge compared to this, oh my God, last night 15 new articles just in my subfield were posted to this reputable preprint server. We live among each of these kinds of temporalities.
Let me extend the question just a little bit, because the pace of technological change for something like AI, or the pace of technological change like for genetic engineering, these things are happening very quickly. The public wants to regulate in some way. Do we have the expertise to do so? I wonder from a political standpoint, maybe we'll start with you, Dave, but I'd like you both to address this, which is how can the public kind of have some sort of reasonable participation in the ordering of science so that it actually counts for goodness rather than just for corporate gain or for something that we have. So let's start with you, Danielle, and then we'll go over, because I think it relates to this question.
Sure. So, yes, I mean, I think we're all struggling with a kind of a temporality, misalignment, whether that's between the speed of developments in generative foundation models versus the pace at which regulators can understand and think about that, or how universities work and the like. It can be nice to go back and think about other cases. So take automobiles, for instance. Automobiles, when they were first created, didn't have brakes. Think about that. Driving a car without brakes, not a very appealing prospect, right? And it took decades, which is kind of crazy, for brakes to become required as a matter of regulation in cars. But once brakes were required, cars could go a lot faster, because now you don't mind driving a car at a certain speed if you can actually brake the thing. So the point is that once people recognized that safety in automobiles was going to be beneficial to innovation, then the processes, the technological process and the democratic process, started to get in sync with each other. And I think that's the kind of moment that we're in right now, where we have to recognize that a certain amount of safety built into AI development will actually help innovation. And if we can bring those sort of values into alignment, safety and innovation values, that's when you sort of get your temporalities reconnected to each other. So I think that's what we're working on right now.
Dave?
Yeah, I agree with Danielle, and it is a great question. On this topic of AI and let's say the broader penumbra of, let's say, computing in societies, not only AI, but it includes things like social media. One of the things I'm continually amazed and actually very upset about, not only such a muscular optimism after all, is the many decades failure to even try to begin to formulate basic common sense regulations within this country, and not only within this country, about that large, incredibly impactful sector. And Danielle, I like your example if I put my historian's cap on as well. Every version that I can think of that we might call kind of communications technologies going back a long, long ways has been subject before, quicker than the breaks, within some reasonable amount of time, at least within this country, to some form of imperfect, to be modified, try it and we'll change it later, regulation, state, federal, and so on. That no one said you'll squelch every possible version of innovation if you regulate anything ever. That was not a winning argument. It shouldn't have been a winning argument. It was not a winning argument for any technology that I can think of. Certainly one that has the kind of impact among many, many people every day that this collection of things do now. So I find this frankly an outrageous failure, and that's one that I don't have an answer for. But I think this is actually different from the historical examples that otherwise I come back to.